IELTS Trainer 2, published by Cambridge University Press and UCLES 2019. This recording is copyright. Exam Practice Test 6, Listening, Part 1. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1. Part 1. You will hear a man who works in a tourist information office talking to a woman who wants information about tours. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Morning, Kingstown Tourist Information. This is David speaking. How can I help you?
Oh, hi. Look, I'm coming to Kingstown on holiday and wondered if you could give me some information about tours.
Yes, of course. Is there anything particular you're interested in?
Well, I heard there was a glowworm tour.
Yes, indeed. It's $93 and lasts for 3 hours.
And what are the main activities?
Well, the first thing is traveling to the other side of the lake.
You mean by boat?
No, it's the little train that runs along the shore of the lake. It's very popular.
Oh, my children will love that.
And that's how you get round to the caves. This is where the glowworms live. So you spend some time exploring the caves and looking at the remarkable lights and patterns given off by the worms in the dark.
That does sound interesting. And any other information?
Oh, just one thing. How old are your children?
7 and 10. Why?
No, that's okay. It's just that children must be 5 or older to go in the caves. Otherwise, they might get scared in the dark. But yours will be fine.
Okay, well, that's one to think about. And what about Silver Fjord? That's so famous. We'd like to go there.
Well, a day trip costs $220.
And how do we travel down to the fjord? Fly?
That's a lot more expensive, I'm afraid. On this tour, you go in a coach. It's about a 2-hour drive through fantastic scenery.
Do we get a break? I think my children might get a bit bored.
Yes, you stop at Easton.
That's to take a walk, is it?
Yes, there's a nice path by the river. You stop in Easton for half an hour, so there's plenty of time.
That sounds nice.
So then you get down to Silver Fjord, and you really spend most of the day going for a cruise on the fjord. It's spectacular mountain scenery, and you also cruise past a huge waterfall, which is another highlight of the day.
Well, that does sound amazing. And should we bring our own food, or is lunch provided?
No, lunch is included. It's a barbecue on the boat.
And what about marine life?
Yes, you'll definitely see seals.
Dolphins?
No, not in that part of the country. But if you're lucky, there will be whales as well.
Oh, well, my kids would absolutely love that.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Then another popular option is the High Country Tour. That's $105.
Oh, I heard about this. You visit a historic home, don't you?
Yes, that's right, and they serve you lunch.
Is that actually inside the house?
No, at this time of year it'll be the garden, which is really pretty.
Oh, I like the sound of that.
Yes, it's a really great meal apparently.
And what about in the afternoon?
You go up and have a look around the farm. It's just close to the house. So if you're from the city, it's a chance to really see what life is like here. The High Country Tour gets excellent reviews from visitors.
Great! So then what about the zip line? My children really want to do that. How much is it?
The zip line is $75.
And is it safe?
Absolutely. You are suspended from the wire in a special harness, and then you just glide down the wire.
My friend said that below you've got this amazing ancient forest.
That's right, and it's really special to see it from above. Not something we do very often if you think about it.
No, I suppose that's true. And, how fast do you go?
Hang on, I've got the information here. 68 kilometers an hour.
That doesn't mean much to me. What's that in miles?
Oh yes, it's here. In miles per hour, it's about 43.
Wow! My kids will definitely want to do that. Okay, well look, I'll just talk it over with my husband and...
That is the end of Part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 1. Exam Practice Test 6, Listening Part 2. You will hear a guide talking to a group of people who are visiting an open-air museum. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Well, good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to the Wilford Living Museum. Before you look around, I'd like to tell you a bit about the history of Wilford and the purpose of the museum. Well, if we go back to the early 1800s, Wilford was very different to what you see today. At that time, the forests had already been cut down, but there were no large urban settlements here, just a few small villages. And this whole area was a place where local people kept animals or grew crops. Those were the only economic activities. But then, in 1830, something happened in Wilford that transformed the area. The discovery of rich deposits of coal and other minerals opened up many commercial possibilities. Mines were built so these deposits could be brought to the surface. Then a canal was constructed so that canal boats could transport the minerals to other regions. Finally, a railway was built through Wilford in the 1850s, creating many new opportunities. By the 1870s, Wilford had become an important manufacturing centre. A few factories successfully produced fabrics from cotton and wool. However, what Wilford was best known for was manufacturing all sorts of tools, machinery and other items out of iron and steel. The attempt to set up a pottery industry here, however, making items for the home out of clay, was never really a success. So for the next 100 years or so, Wilford was a thriving industrial region. However, by the 1970s, the old industries here were in decline. Much of the land at this site wasn't being used, so the local council decided to set up a living museum here. The idea was for visitors to be able to walk around and visit the sorts of factories, shops, homes and schools that were once found here. When the museum first opened in 1976, 2,000 visitors came on the first weekend alone. Since then, visitor numbers have just grown and grown. They now stand at 300,000 per year, and we anticipate further growth in the years to come. In fact, just recently, we welcomed our 9 millionth visitor, which was an exciting day for us. As well as our regular visitors, the museum has a number of other uses. We work closely with universities, whose staff consult the range of documents and artefacts we hold here. As well as that, those making movies and television shows often come to the museum because it makes a great set for historical scenes. There's even a possibility in future we may open up the museum for weddings and other private events.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
OK, so if you take out your maps, I'll just point out a few places you might like to visit. So right now, we're standing in the ticket office at the bottom of your maps. So, one place I'd recommend is the Old Bakery. This is a typical bakery from this area from about 100 years ago. To get there from the ticket office, walk up Stafford Street and then turn into Rigby Road. Walk down Rigby Road. There are a few interesting places along the way, and the Old Bakery is right next to the canal. Another interesting place is the doctor's surgery. This was moved here brick by brick and rebuilt on the museum site. Walk up Stafford Street until you reach the dock. You see the cafe. Walk past that and the doctor's surgery is just there. Cooper's Cottage is also fascinating. A worker's cottage from the 19th century. Walk up Stafford Street and take the first turning on the left. The road curves round to the west, then south as it climbs Jack's Hill. You'll pass a few little houses on the way up, and Cooper's Cottage is right on the summit of Jack's Hill. The stables are also great. This is where they kept all the horses. Again, walk up Stafford Street to the dock and turn right. Walk round the dock till you get to the canal, then cross the bridge over the canal to reach the stables. Also, be sure to visit the old school. So, walk northeast up through the museum, and it's not too far. The old school is right on the corner of Stafford Street and Rigby Road. Now, one other thing that I need to mention.
That is the end of part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 2. Exam Practice Test 6, Listening, Part 3. You will hear two commerce students called Stella and Nathan talking about the importance of market research in business. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Hi, Nathan. Shall we compare ideas for our assignment on market research?
Good idea. So first in the assignment, I think we should explain what market research is. One definition I found was this: gathering information about consumers' needs and preferences.
I like that. Nice and clear. So then, we need to establish the benefits of market research. Why do it? I read that many business people think it's about finding the next market they can exploit, but it's more complex than that.
I agree. To me, it's about unpredictability. Markets can change unexpectedly, but if you've done research, you can minimise the chance that something will go wrong in your own business.
That's a really significant point. You may also learn the most effective means of promoting your business.
But that depends on the business. It's not a general advantage.
No, you're right. But I do think the sums you invest in market research, you'll see a return on that eventually.
That's it exactly. Great point. The trouble is, too many of those working in business take a short-term view.
OK, so there are benefits. But there are criticisms of market research as well. We should acknowledge that in the assignment.
But some criticisms are more valid than others.
Like?
Well, apparently some managers say they're just too busy. But that's a poor excuse.
Maybe they think they already know everything they need to know.
Maybe they do, but that's an issue with them, not with market research.
OK, fair enough. But I read an interesting study out of the USA showing that the results of a lot of market research are just unreliable. The supposed developments identified by the research never occur.
Yes, that's a good point. Then another question is, can businesses actually see if market research is working? I mean, is it possible for a business to say categorically that increased profits resulted from market research?
But that's a criticism of how businesses are structured, not research itself.
Yeah, OK. Though you've got to admit, market researchers love jargon. These are examples from one report I read. Psychographics, cool hunting, and asynchronous research. Some people are bound to be put off by these terms.
Yes, that's a reasonable complaint.
So, what about sources of information for market research? Which sources of information work best? I mean, we all know that putting cameras in stores tells us a lot about consumer behaviour.
Yes, that's well documented. But I read that managers can learn a lot about social trends just by doing really obvious things, like keeping up with the news on TV, radio and digital networking sites. I hadn't thought it could be that simple.
No, me neither. Then there's a lot of data put out by bodies like the National Census and the Civil Service. That can be helpful.
Maybe, but it depends on the business. What I hadn't expected, though, was the evidence showing that talking to consumers directly about their preferences really works.
Yeah, I was a bit taken aback when I read that. But apparently it's more effective than internet questionnaires and polls.
I think people are less likely to be honest in questionnaires.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
All right, so If a business wants to use its own resources for market research, what's the process?
Good question. Let's think about a company that isn't using outside consultants, but doing it internally. Then I think the first step is staff education. You've got to get all employees committed to maximise the chances of success.
Agreed. Then you need to show staff examples of what they can do every day.
You mean in their interactions with customers?
Yes. What precisely should they ask customers in order to get valuable information? Show staff the sorts of things they can ask on a daily basis.
OK. And next, I was reading an article by the BQR group. Apparently, staff need to keep an account of what the customers are saying.
You mean on computer or by hand?
The format doesn't matter. But say every Friday they should add to the document, so they build up a picture of customer opinions, and the insights aren't lost.
Good point. Right, next, I read about ways of motivating staff. Business Guide magazine had a report on the importance of maintaining motivation.
So, what? By looking ahead and deciding what to do next?
Well, in fact, Business Guide's approach is to get your staff together around a table as frequently as possible to discuss their findings.
That sounds like a good approach. Next, you need to provide detailed feedback about any changes you decide, so everyone can see the outcomes of the research.
Nice idea. Then you have to ensure continued participation by the staff. You want market research to be ongoing, not just a one-off.
Oh, this is the idea of delegating, so that each staff member is accountable for market research in one area of the business.
Yeah, exactly. And then another aspect of this is the fact...
That is the end of Part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 3. Exam Practice Test 6, Listening Part 4. You will hear a biology student talking about water and how much people need to drink each day. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hi, everyone. My presentation today is looking at drinking water. Now, we know that water is a vital nutrient for human life. But exactly how much of it do we need to drink? Well, today I'm going to review some of the research. So, for example, there's a common idea that we should drink 8 glasses of water every day. But researchers say that the 8 glasses a day rule is a myth. Some people might need more than 8 glasses, some a lot less. The only group for whom the rule is useful seems to be the elderly, because they don't always feel thirsty, even when their bodies are actually short of water. So for them, 8 glasses a day might be a good rough guide. Okay, let's look next at what effects water has on the body. One issue of interest is weight loss. And there are lots of theories about this. It's been claimed that dieters should drink more at nighttime, or drink when they first wake up. But there's no research to back this up. But actually, there is some evidence from studies to show that subjects who drank a lot of water and then had their meals lost more weight. But that may only be because the water filled them up and reduced their appetites. I also read some of the research done by Dr. Amaldi, who's looked in depth at this whole issue of drinking water. And one of his studies does support the common claim that water is good for the stomach. In particular, it seems to increase the rate at which digestion takes place, which overall has a number of health benefits. Another interesting study I read about took place in the US, and this one was investigating the effects of dehydration. That is, not having enough water in the body. And what the US study indicated was that when a subject was low on water, their body's ability to regulate its own temperature was compromised compared to a properly hydrated subject. Now there's another frequent claim about water that I was interested in looking into. But in my reading anyway, I could find no evidence at all to support the idea that hydration improves or enhances the skin in any specific way. So that claim may be a bit of a myth as well. Another interesting aspect of this concerns the brain. And I read about a couple of research studies investigating how water intake may affect brain function. In the first study, the research subjects were female, and the less hydrated group were affected more frequently by headaches compared to those who drank more water. In the second study, the research subjects were all male, and this time a lack of water in the body was associated with a number of findings. In particular, the subjects in this group reported increased feelings of anxiety when dehydrated. So, in summary, we can see that, yes, there are some health benefits from drinking plenty of water, but in many of these studies, the benefit was quite small. And it's probably true that in general, on the internet and so on, the benefits of drinking lots of water are overstated. But what about the opposite? Can you drink too much water? Well, it's possible, but it's not a common problem. Actually, the human body kind of prevents us drinking too much. Australian researchers discovered that when subjects were fully hydrated, they actually found swallowing problematic. Their bodies just wouldn't allow it so easily. So that's an interesting finding. It is true that people do occasionally become sick from drinking too much water, although it is rare. So, there are recorded instances of illness among athletes who have been encouraged to drink a lot, for example. According to doctors, people who have drunk too much water too quickly have become what's called hyponatremic. Basically, this means that the makeup of their blood has changed, and it now contains such a high proportion of salt that they suffer an adverse effect. But it's very rare for this sort of hyponatremia to be a dangerous condition. So, based on the reading I've done, the best advice is to trust your body. Drink water when you're thirsty, but you probably don't need to drink more often than that.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.